This female doctor, I remember her holding me, and I remember her saying, Kambua, I'm so sorry. And she said, I understand. I have been there. And I think those words were like a lifeline for me in that moment, because I realized my world is falling apart, but I'm not the only one. It was a few weeks later that my father was rushed to the hospital, and it began a journey of a couple of months of him fighting for his life. And those months also became, my life revolved around my father and his health. And it was a very, very heavy period for our family. And to see my mother having to be brave through it, to see my brothers, to see, people who loved and admired him. But it was such a crisis in my faith, because I knew and I had seen God do such great things in the lives of people. I had seen God do such great things in my father's life in the past, that I couldn't understand how it seemed as though the more we prayed, the worse things got. And I didn't understand it at all. I remember conversations with doctors at the hospital where they would tell us, because I think they figured, or they thought we, or at least I, was in denial. And I told them, no, I actually believe that God can heal him right now from this situation. And here's the thing, I still believe in a God who can do anything. I believe in a God who can raise the dead. I believe that. So I held on to that faith. I remember this one day that, our family and friends, because we'd gotten a community that really journeyed with us. It almost felt like their lives for a moment also revolved around that time. They were with us at the hospital. They were with us through the process. And I remember this day where we had been, it was a regular day at the hospital, but at this point, my father had sort of lost consciousness. We had stayed on, it was the evening, and we gathered around the parking lot to pray. But before we did, my mother and I had been the last people in the hospital room, and my mom asked me, Kambua, do you want to stay on a little longer? She was really tired. The nights were long, the days were long, and it had been going on for a couple of months. She said, do you want to stay on a little longer? I said, give me a few more minutes and I'll come outside. And I sat there with my dad. I had been playing him music that he loved. At that time, the album I remember playing over and over was by Reuben Kigame, because he loved Reuben Kigame's music. So it was playing very quietly in the background. We were in the ICU, so you couldn't play loud music, but they had been so gracious to allow us to play music for him. And I sat with my father, and I had an opportunity to say to him, to thank him for being the father that he had been to me. And I remember telling him, thank you for protecting me, for fighting for me. I remember telling him, thank you for loving us with everything that he was, for being such a selfless dad. And I think it had taken me such a long time to get to a place where I could tell him, we will be okay. If you have to go, you don't have to be strong for us. I told my dad we would be okay if he had to go. But I knew that I would see him the next day. So, when I think back, the signs had all been there, because that morning, my mom had called me and she said, Kambua, you need to come in. I went to the hospital, and it was different that day because usually I would go and I would oil his hands and I would massage his feet. But that day, his hands were so cold. They were so cold, like almost ice cold. And then they would be warm from like halfway through, and he's same with his legs. But I still did what I would do. And I was oiling him and I was rubbing his hands and rubbing his feet. And I thought if I rubbed hard enough and long enough, the warmth would move down to his fingers and move down to his toes. I didn't realize that my father was transitioning already. So when that day I had that talk, I said to him what I needed to say. And then we went to the parking lot and we were praying. And just when we were, finishing up, somebody came to call. I think it was a doctor. So somebody came to call us, said, you need to come back. We ran back, and, those were the final moments in my father's life. And it was devastating because I had never witnessed that transition, that passing away. And now of somebody that I love, it felt like an out-of-body experience. I still see it in my head. I see some of the people who were there. I know there were a lot more people in the room. I see it. I see my mother. I hear the words that she said. I remember feeling so numb that day and the days that followed. I remember waking up in the morning, and I knew what had happened, but it's almost like I was on the outside looking in. I don't know how better to explain that. But I feel now that numbness is a gift that God gave me to preserve me in that time because it was so painful. Grief is something that I had experienced. I had lost my paternal grandparents. I'd lost people that I loved, but I had never lost someone that close to me. So it threw me in a place that was so, I couldn't make sense of for a very long time. And the things that I was ordinarily inspired to do, my music, my social life, they had to almost come to a stop. And I was only doing the things that I was expected to do. So I was expected to show up at work. I showed up at work and I did my work well. But the things that nobody could do for me, like creating music, I stopped for a while because I feel like my music has always come from a very honest place, and that place was it was not alive. It took, I cannot say, a couple of months, a year, I don't know, but eventually the light began to come back in. Slowly but surely, the light began to come back into my life. Part of the things that I was processing at that time was the fact that even if I got children, my dad would not be here to see them, to enjoy them. But it is what it is. Life is what it is. My dad was so crucial in my musical journey because, number one, he's the one who inspired me musically with his singing, with the guitar. He inspired me with the music that he got me to listen to. But also, when I was born, I was named Kambua, who was actually my father's mother, but he nicknamed me Kasoni. This is Kamba for a bird. Later on, he would say that I was his hummingbird because I was always humming. I still hum. I hum a lot. I got in trouble quite a lot in school because I would hum subconsciously in class. I'd be humming and I'd always be like, who is that? Who is humming? I got in trouble, but it's also, I'm now here, I see my son now doing that a lot. He hums. My son, Nathaniel, who I will tell you about, he hums quite a bit without realizing that that's what he's doing. So my dad named me Kasoni. He named me Hummingbird. Not having him there, it felt like the music didn't make sense for me. I didn't know how to create the music without him. I have so many pictures of my dad where, at events, if I was singing and he was there, my dad would be the first person on his feet. He knew my songs. Even when he sang the lyrics wrong, he sang them loudly and proudly. He cheered me on. He believed in me. He told everybody, if you met him, he would tell you, do you know I have a daughter who sings, He believed so much in me. And I suddenly felt like that voice had gone quiet. And so the music also went quiet. I knew that I needed to heal enough to get to a place where I could create music again, honestly and truly. And the first song that I actually did after the loss of my dad is a song called Tutaonana Tena, which is a tribute to his life. It was the first time that I had been able to write something, to sing something in studio. And it was me honoring the life of that great, great, great man. The light was coming back into my life, and I thought, I started getting back to that place of it would be really, really nice to have a child. And so we were trying to have a child, and I had started to get a little anxious. I would mention it in safe spaces with my sisters, with my mother. I'd hint at it, but at this point, people are still like, oh no, you're worried about it's nothing. It will happen. You just need to relax. You've been through so much stress. So I relaxed, and I was still taking it a day at a time. But people start to ask or to hint. So there were subtle conversations in social gatherings. What are you waiting for? I remember one time meeting a heavily pregnant woman who said, harakisha ushike ball Kambua. If you ukipata ball, you'll be so marketable. So I remember, when I got back home and I thought about what she was saying, and basically just suggesting that if I have a child, my brand will be stronger, I'll have more endorsements and da. And well and good. But at this point, she didn't even realize the struggle I was having mentally, emotionally, and the fact that we had started trying and had been trying for a little while and nothing was happening. It felt insensitive in some ways, but I didn't give it too much attention. But slowly the voices started to increase. People got a little bolder by the day. But, God does what he does, when he does, in the way that he does. So I remember, because when you're trying to have a baby, and for those of you who have, you can attest to this, that your calendar means everything. You listen to everything in your body. Sometimes you even think you're pregnant, but you are not. So I was listening to everything that felt out of place, everything that felt different. And many times I was completely wrong. It was just my hormones. And it was I remember the disappointment. Every time I got my period, I remember the disappointment. Because sometimes PMS, premenstrual symptoms, and early pregnancy symptoms can be very similar, actually. So I'd be there thinking, oh my goodness, I'm having cravings, I'm having stomach cramps. This must be pregnancy symptoms. And then my period would come. And so it was such a yo-yo of my emotions. But this one time, my period did not come. And I counted the first day, and I said I was not going to tell anybody until I was 100% sure. And then 2 days, and then 3 days, and then a few days. And I thought, could it really be that I am finally pregnant? I went to a chemist and I bought, I think there were 3 pregnancy tests, different brands, just in case. And I took them home. I was not going to tell anybody. I did not tell my husband, nobody, because I wanted to be able to handle if it's disappointment by myself, to manage it, because you get to a place where you don't want to involve people in your disappointment. So I took the first test, and the line was so faint, it was like not there. So I said, Okay, I think it's leaning towards negative. Let me take another one. I took a second one, and this one came a lot clearer. And I remember sitting in my bathroom. I sat on the floor and I cried because for the first time in years, I'd finally gotten a positive pregnancy test. I could not believe it. I just could not believe it. So, finally I'm like, yes, I was right about the cravings. I was right about the stomach cramps. I was right. I was right about this. I was right about I was getting very sleepy, very tired. I was like, yeah, it was not PMS. It was definitely pregnancy symptoms. I put together something really cute to tell my husband. And I remember telling him, or rather when he understood what I was trying to tell him, I remember my husband kneeling to pray and to thank God because it was a prayer answered. We were so happy. And of course, one by one, we began to talk to the people close to us, sharing the news, our family, not too many people, but just the people who had known where we were at in our journey. I remember the joy, everybody we told, my sisters, our parents, there was so much joy. And I was like, this is how people feel when they are expecting a baby. So I began my prenatals. I looked for a doctor and I began to do what I'm supposed to do. And everything was going great. I didn't even have anything to compare it with, so I figured everything was going great. I was doing everything I was expected to do. My body was feeling okay. I felt that I was growing okay, so we were on track. And then this one day, I began to feel pain, a lot of pain in my hip. And ordinarily, it probably shouldn't be a big deal. Pop a pill, Panadol or something, and you'll be fine. But because I was pregnant, I wasn't going to just take anything. So I called the doctor and he said, do this, this, and that. And he explained that as your body is changing, as your hips are expanding, this can happen, that some women experience that kind of pain. But this pain just got worse. It got so painful that I couldn't I'd get out of bed in a lot of pain. I couldn't just stand as easily as I would. I couldn't even just open the car door and get out of the car. It was so painful. I was just in a lot of pain. And I remember talking to my mom and I said, Mommy, I'm just in a lot of pain. And she's like, how many days has it been? And we talked and she said, Kambua, go to the hospital. She was like, when you're pregnant, even if it's a very tiny thing that sounds insignificant, it's good for you to just go get checked. So I called my sister. I told her, I need you to take me to the hospital. I have pain. I need them to check. I don't think it's anything. That morning that I called my sister and told her that I needed her to take me to the hospital, I remember getting into the shower and I was just so overcome by an emotion I could not place. And I sobbed in the shower. I sobbed so hard. Anyway, the day progressed. We got together, went to the hospital. In fact, it was a really good day. My cousin had a baby at the same hospital. So we're like, we'll kill two birds with one stone. We'll go see her, and then we'll get a doctor there who can look at me and then go home. I got a doctor. He had a look at me, listened to what my symptoms were. He suggested that I could have an ovarian cyst, which he said was not harmful to the baby, but it was important to know if that's what we're dealing with so they can know how to manage it alongside the pregnancy. I was about 8 going to 9 weeks pregnant. So he sent us to go get a scan, a transvaginal scan, to establish everything that was going on in my uterus. So I just remember being told to drink a lot of water. a lot of water. Kunywa maji. And I drank and I drank. And they're like, drink until you're you really, really have to go to the bathroom. So I drank so much water, you guys, in such a short time. And then finally, I told them, okay, I'm ready. My bladder is good. So we went into the scan. The lady who was doing the scan, she was very pleasant. How are you? So how many weeks are you? And, I was getting into this thing of, yeah, I'm 7 weeks, I'm 8 weeks. So yeah, till I'm 8 weeks, I'll be 9 weeks soon. Oh, congratulations, it's your first baby. Yes. And then she got her tool and began to scan. And I remember her scanning for a while. And there's this thing that doctors have where you're trying to read their faces because you can tell that they've gone on just a little longer than they probably should. And I remember just looking up to her and I was trying to read her face. And she remained very professional, was looking at her screen and she kept checking. And she asked me again, how many weeks did you say you were? And I repeated. At this point, I started feeling my throat choking up a little because I thought, I was like, there's no way anything could have happened. I think she's just being careful. Well, she did it for a while and then she said, I want you to go and empty your bladder, then come, we'll do a different scan. So I left the room, I left her with my sister, and I went, I emptied my bladder. I was still in high spirits because, what could go wrong? And I came back into the room and she's like, okay, we're gonna do this. So she did the transvaginal scan. It's obviously very uncomfortable, but she did it. And then I think the only thing I remember today is when she said, Kambua, I'm sorry, there's no heartbeat. And I feel like my heart stopped with those words. And I think she said other things, but that's what I remember. I felt like it's like everything had been taken away from me in seconds. Everything in literally seconds. And I know that I was sobbing very loudly, in disbelief, in shock, hoping that she'll say something different. I remember her saying, let me just try again one more time, because sometimes, even as doctors, we could get it wrong. Let me just try again. She tried and then she said, you know what, let me get a colleague of mine. Let me just get another eye. The guy came, he was very mechanical, very, very mechanical. He literally looked at me for, I don't think it was more than a minute. And he was just like, yeah, there's no heartbeat. And he was done, And I felt it was such a mix of emotions because, first of all, I felt half angry at this guy for how can you be so casual about, and my world is falling apart right now. And I remember, I don't know what I was telling my sister. I don't know that I was telling her anything. I was crying. The doctor, this female doctor, I remember her holding me. And I remember her saying, Kambua, I'm so sorry. And she said, I understand. I have been there. And I think those words were like a lifeline for me in that moment, because I realized my world is falling apart, but I'm not the only one. It's not the first time it's happened, because it felt like, for me, in that moment, it feels like this has never happened to anyone. How can you lose a pregnancy? And I kept asking what happened, what could have happened? And she kept trying to explain that it could possibly have been a chromosomal issue. There's nothing you can do about it. And, the facts, the statistics, nothing was making me feel better, but I still wanted to know. I remember in a few minutes, my husband was there. It felt like a few minutes, felt like everything happened in a few minutes. My husband was there, family was there. And, you know, when my dad passed, when I felt like the wind had been taken out of me, this is how I felt. I felt like it had repeated itself, only different. And I kept wondering, what did I do something? What did I do? I was scheduled for a D&C. I didn't know what that was until that time. The dilation and cartilage is simply means that they clean your uterus and take out the baby. You cannot be induced because it's a very early pregnancy. So they have to put you through the procedure. That day when we were at the hospital and got that news, I called my primary doctor. And, he said, I don't understand. I was with you guys last week. Everything was okay. Let me see you tomorrow. Just go home. Let me see you tomorrow before you do anything. So we went home. It was a very, very long night. It was a long night. I pleaded with God, to just bring that baby back to life, to bring that heartbeat back. And we had a really, really long night. My husband and I, and family calling us from just everywhere, people praying with us. And that morning, we went to see my doctor, my primary doctor, went through the same procedure, fill up your bladder, drink so much. I drank so much water, but I was drinking water as I was sobbing because I was like, what is this going to do? This is going to be like the fourth time somebody's telling me there's no heartbeat. So I drank water and I was crying, and I drank the water and I was crying. And he did the scan and he's like, for sure, we do not have a heartbeat. And when I was taken to the hospital for this procedure, I remember when I woke up being in so much pain. I was in so much pain. And I said to the nurse, I was cold, I was in pain. And I told her, I'm in so much pain, and she tried to explain that we actually give you medication for your uterus to contract so that you don't bleed out. So basically, I was going to have to put up with the pain for a little while longer. I remember leaving that recovery room, and family and friends were there. And one of our family friends, I remember her saying to me, Kambua, it was not your fault. Don't blame yourself. And those words were so important to me because as a woman, I feel like this is the one job I should get right. That's what we feel. We feel like, and I think even about Kambua at 25, I imagined that getting pregnant should be so easy. When I got pregnant, I imagined that sustaining a pregnancy should be so easy. I never knew that there's a possibility that you can have a baby and they die in your womb. I didn't know. I knew, but I didn't know. And, for days on end, because our people, our community rallied around us. My boss at work, I had spoken to her, and, she gave me the time that I needed to recover. But for a really long time, I felt like I had lost. I felt like God had allowed me to experience such joy, and then in a short time, it was completely gone. And I felt like we had tried for so long for that miracle. Chances of it ever happening again were close to nil, is what I thought. I remember one of my friends saying to me, she came to see me and she said, Kambua, God will do it again. He will do it again. At that time, people's words, I'd hear them and, they'd go out the other ear because of the state of my heart in that moment. There's such a shame that comes with the miscarriage because you feel like you failed. You have failed as a woman. And I didn't know who to have those conversations with. I realized when I had the miscarriage that there were people even very close to me who had had miscarriages that I did not know about. and only got to know about because of this situation. They would say to me, Kambua, I've been there as well. This is what happened. I realized that we don't have spaces that are safe enough for us to have these conversations. I saw a few people, some that I know, some that I don't know, who have tried talking about, miscarriages on the socials and just how much hate they would get from people, from strangers. Why are you telling us about your dead babies is one of the comments that I saw directed at a friend of mine. Why do you keep telling us about your dead babies? Because she had had a series of miscarriages. And I felt like because we already you get attacked so much, you're attacked for not having children, you're attacked for having and losing them. I remember at that point being like, this story, I will die with this story. I will die with it because I cannot handle the pain that I have and the pain that people would inflict on me. But when I see what a lifeline that doctor gave me in that room when she said, I have been there, when I think of the women, my friends, my family, who said, I know what it feels like. This is what I went through. I realized that they created a safe space for me. They created a place where I realized that, number one, it wasn't my fault. And number two, I could move forward. And number three, I could still have hopes of being a mother someday. So I made a mental note to myself that at whatever point in my life that God would allow me to, I would share my story in the hope that a woman who has just been told, I'm sorry, you do not have a heartbeat, will remember my voice and say that she went through this and she got out on the other side. That it's not the end, that it's not your fault. And I pray that God would give me a space where as women we can talk. We have such a culture of silence and shame as Africans. The things we don't talk about, the things we're not allowed to talk about. And yet it's our reality. I remember somebody sharing with me statistics that 1 out of 4 women will have a miscarriage. 1 out of 4 women means that it's a woman in my family, it's a woman in my church, it's a woman in my small group. It's so close. It's ignorant of us not to have those conversations. I wondered about even our medical space because I've had friends who've had miscarriages, and thankfully I landed upon a woman who was so sensitive and so kind. But I have people who've landed upon situations that have been so insensitive, and it's treated like you lost it, let's get it out, like it was not a life that you carried. You don't think about our mental health because I know it affected me greatly for a long time. Miscarriages are such a private pain, such a personal pain, because, in 80% of miscarriages happen in the first trimester, before 12 weeks. And for me, it happened 8-9 weeks, thereabouts. That's about the time where most miscarriages happen. Nobody has seen you pregnant. You probably don't have a baby bump in your first trimester. And so telling people that you're grieving is so hard for them to understand. We didn't even know that you are pregnant. And then people feel that because we didn't see the bump, we didn't see the baby, that it's not a baby. And we don't realize that grief is grief at whatever stage. From the moment a woman learns that she is carrying life, that she's pregnant, from the moment that faint line appeared on my pregnancy test, everything changed inside of me. And so when it was suddenly cut off, it threw me into a really, really difficult place. And I feel that we need to talk. We need to have these conversations amongst ourselves as women, but also amongst the caregivers, that as you provide care, which we are so grateful for, you can also be aware and sensitive of our mental health, our emotional well-being, our physical well-being, and that we can break that culture of silence, the taboos, the stigma. As Africans, we talk a lot about uchawi, urogi, all of these things that we talk about to explain away the things that we don't understand. that we can stop blaming women for losing children. We can stop blaming women for being unable to have children. So I'm welcoming you to have conversations with me, conversations of the heart, conversations that have changed and impacted me in a great, great way, but conversations that will not only change your life, but also the lives of generations of men and women to come.
Yeah. So after that, after having my son, I was sure that, me, I'm across the river now. Struggle is behind me.
Yes.
I didn't know what lay ahead. So total, I've had 3 miscarriages and 1 stillborn. So even just saying it is just one of those things I don't even like talking about because it's really heavy.